Of all the bad places I've been to in the United States, I don't know if I've ever been to a city that's as vastly run down, abandoned, and out of control as Oakland, California. It's a very ugly, rough, littered, dangerous place where the laws aren't enforced and the crime is staggering. I drove around Oakland for an entire day in late October of 2021 to see what it was like these days, and I don't recall seeing any part of the city that was welcoming, safe, or clean. It was really quite an experience. Oakland's had trouble for decades now. In the 1990s, it was home to an explosion of gangs and drug use, though a lot of the gang activity here isn't nearly as bad as it was 30 years ago. Then, following the Bay Area tech boom, came a spike in the cost of living, which priced out the lower class. Now the middle class is priced out too, because over the last 5 years, the cost to rent or own a home is pushing even more people out onto the streets. Oakland is drug-filled. It's a graffiti-covered shell of its former self, where you can't let your guard down for a minute or risk being robbed, assaulted, or shot at least in the greater downtown area. Here's a map of the area I covered in my car on this day. Oakland can be broken down into mini regions, but we'll keep it simple and split it into two, West and East Oakland. That's usually how it's divided anyways. Here in West Oakland, you have the greater downtown area. Downtown itself doesn't look too bad at all. It's pretty dangerous, but just a few blocks west of downtown and you find all sorts of abandoned warehouses and people lining the streets in their RVs and cars, clearly victims of homelessness. This is the side of town where most of the homeless camps are located. Some look like something you'd see in Haiti. Lean-to shacks made of recovered junk that serve as 4 walls and a roof, but that's just about it. Other areas just outside of downtown are home to hundreds of people camped out in makeshift shanties among piles of trash with rats. Parts of West Oakland don't even look like the United States. Any between the litter and the gutted buildings are neighborhoods. Can you imagine being surrounded by this? I mean, paying $3,000 a month for a crummy apartment to live here? It's an expensive ghetto, and that's not a good combination, people. I walked around downtown and within 30 seconds saw a mentally ill woman hanging on the wiper blades of a city bus, clearly out of her mind. This was just a block from the hotel I was staying in, and it's like that all over the place. I can only imagine the things that a city bus driver in Oakland, California has to deal with on an hourly basis. Just down the block, I saw a woman get punched in the face by a man. He just socked her in the head right in the middle of the street during an argument, and everybody that saw it just shrugged it off. It's Oakland. Never a dull moment, I guess. There's no law and order in Oakland anymore. The police are underfunded or defunded. They're just outmanned. Their morale is low, and they've been asked to direct their efforts only to the most dire needs. If somebody isn't bleeding, it might take a long time for help to arrive. People run lights and speed around town, and clearly littering and vandalism isn't going to get you in trouble here anymore. Here in East Oakland is where it's really dangerous, like even more dangerous than West Oakland. West Oakland is mostly just ugly and run down where all the homeless people are, but East Oakland is where a lot of the poor people live, and this is where a lot of the gangs are. Shootings happen down here just about every day, sometimes many times a day. It's as gritty and grimy as the West Side, just on a far larger scale. To me, it seemed like East Oakland's been handed over to the dregs of society to do with as they wish. And this is what they've done. Oakland's hell on earth. It's lawless, it's run down, it's ugly, it's dangerous, it's woke. No wonder the Warriors and Raiders left. The A's are next. They're going to move to Vegas soon. Look at the place. Would you want to play here? Oakland's problems don't just go block after block. It's mile after mile. And very few people I talk to who live here think there's a chance it can be saved. I think Oakland, California is beyond repair. Forever. But Oakland had this like vast, just miles of neglect and like, you know, it reminded me of Baltimore where like if you were to like create like the perfect like inner city and put the bad characters on the corner and spray paint the place and
Right.
like make it look like for like a movie. It was like that vast. I had not really spent a lot of time in Oakland. I did meet some really super cool people. But there's a vibe there. It's very scary from the outset.
Yeah.
You're driving around and you're like, oh my God. But once you get to like chat with some people. I mean, I talk to a lot of people in Oakland, like more than in any other place. Like I spend a lot of time. And so I wanted to just, get feedback from someone that's been there for a long time based on, what I saw in that particular area. I guess I'm just interested to hear from someone who lives there, how bad is the reputation of that part of Oakland?
Yeah, gosh, boy, where to begin? So I used to always think of Oakland as kind of like you would go up through downtown. There's this main street called Broadway where there's a lot of just beautiful Art Deco and old school architecture, theaters and whatnot. And yet half the buildings, half the offices or more are just, abandoned or, nobody's in there. And you'll drive by the headquarters of Clorox, one of the world's biggest consumer products companies. And then 2 blocks away, it's just, plywood on the windows, vape shops, things like that. But you'll drive up through what I always thought was like driving up through a strip there. And then as long as you didn't deviate too far either side, you were pretty much okay. Like East Oakland's pretty rough. There's areas of West Oakland that are kind of sketchy. And but it just seems in the last, I want to say last 3 years or so, it's really gotten just more, I don't know, just sad. It just, there, like any major city, you're going to have rough areas and there's going to be some homeless and some, places you avoid, at night. But man, in the last 3 years or so in particular, it just seems like it's just any street you go down around the main downtown or some of those other areas. And you just don't want to walk around, never mind nighttime. You don't even walk around the daylight in some of those areas. And like the areas in East Oakland in particular, you were talking about, just they live up to their reputation.
Yeah, it was not just blocks. It was like literally like miles of just a different type of place that I had seen in which it's very urban, very gritty, very industrial, very abandoned, very neglected, very dangerous feeling. I walked around downtown, and to be honest, like I was still on my toes I left Oakland, went to San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, and I was 6 days later in Seattle, and I'd be walking around downtown and I'd hear like a car door. I hear something, and I was on my toes just from the 2 nights I walked around downtown Oakland because I didn't feel dangerous. I never felt in danger walking around, but there's a vibe that I could tell. It just was on edge. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a weird mix of a city because you do have these areas like the area East Oakland where you're talking about in particular, where the Coliseum is. Again, it's always been industrial, but now it's just like a wasteland of homeless camps, abandoned or cars, motorhomes that people are living in, and there's just nothing about it that makes you feel good or clean. I mean, you just feel like really, sketchy about parking over there, walking to a game. And it's really sad. So you got that area, which is, pretty grimy, but then there's some really nice parts of town too. When you get up into what we call the hills, which is, kind of where we live, it's a little bit nicer. And it's a weird DNA for a city. This mix of hardcore gritty areas that you don't want to go anywhere near and nice common areas. So there's a lot of dichotomies here in this city.
Yeah. So you said a few years ago it started to kind of really get worse, and I agree with you. I saw there were parts of San Leandro that I drove on and International. It's just trash and homeless people, and it doesn't look like it should look in a very wealthy part of this country, right? A few years ago, you said it got really bad. Like, is there a reason for that, or can you pinpoint on like why all of a sudden the last few years it's kind of gotten worse in Oakland?
Gosh, it's hard to say. I don't know if it's all because of the politics or just how how the approach is taken to dealing with homeless and issues, for people who, are in need of, assistance or whatnot. But I remember a few years back, we had an election here where the mayor, they did a ranked choice voting election, which a lot of people didn't understand at first. And the person who got elected mayor was the person that most people weren't actually voting for. And ever since then, I want to say that was probably about 12 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. It seems like the politics have really been not really. I want to say the politics haven't really worked toward solving city problems. It's more just like watching out for your own specific group, your own constituency. Fighting. Politicians fighting with the police department, the cops. Unable to do their job. They're always having issues there. And I think it's just been this combination of things that have just really, really affected things. And I don't know where this increase in, I hate to keep hammering on the homeless situation, but you can't avoid it here. And I don't know where these people are coming from, but there has been an explosion of it. And you just look off to the side, and it just seems like every year it's gotten worse and worse and bigger and bigger. And they brought in some of these, I think they call them temporary tiny homes, and they just end up getting trashed and getting turned into, it just ends up becoming more of a, I hate to say it, but it just ends up becoming more of a dump than it was before.
But I get a sense that like the city is so vastly overrun with just neglect that I don't know how you would, is it fixable?
It's a weird situation because when you talk about vast, literally it's a big city. Like geographically, it covers a lot of areas, and there's a lot of different parts of town. And there are, I think it's just one of these cases where there's a lot of issues, and you try to fix something, and somebody else will come in and say, well, you are going against these people or this group, and everybody kind of tends to look out for themselves. I do agree there is a good sense of pride. I love Oakland. Even with all of its problems, I still love it. It's still a nice city, as long as you. I hate to say it, as long as you stay away from the bad parts of town. But yeah, you just feel like times like after all these years, if it hasn't been fixed yet, I don't know if it can be fixed. And, I think it just lends to a sense of entropy about it. We can't do anything, so why try?
Yeah, Oakland very clearly is the haves and have-nots. And I think that's how it's becoming in this country. I think the middle class in the Bay Area is getting shrunk down to, really nothing. You got a lot of young people moving in that can't really afford to live on their own, that have to crash with friends or, get just the worst living conditions so they can be alone. Or, you've got the people that have been there for a while that have great jobs that are clearly, able to buy a $1.7 million house in a upper middle class neighborhood.
Yeah. It's an interesting place, to say the least. I'll say that about it. Yeah, it's, and unfortunately, it's just gotten worse over the last few years. And I don't know if the politicians can solve it. I don't know. I don't think they can solve the issues. So I don't know if that means anybody can. Who's going to take care of all the issues here? I don't know if anybody can.
Is there a solution for Oakland, or is it even fixable at this point?
Are things fixable? Absolutely, things are fixable. But right now, it's just such a deep, entrenched problem. And there are people who are a lot more. I listen to a lot of experts. I think Michael Schellenberger is one of them. There's another lady, Jackie Berlin, who's out there on social media too, trying to save her son. But from what I've learned and experienced, that it's such a multifaceted and deep entrenched problem that it's going to take some serious accountability and drive to actually do it. For me, what I've seen is that it's a couple things. One, we have this sort of laissez-faire culture towards drugs out here. And I see it as strictly a drug problem right now. And no matter what anybody tells you, yes, there are some people with mental health issues, but it's really a drug issue right now. That's the critical point that we need to address. And there's such deep interest right now, everything from various agencies and money, and it's going to take some serious accountability and policy that's going to change. And I know from personal experience of seeing what happens from an outpatient setting, if you're trying to get treatment for people, it's really difficult. It's extremely difficult, especially here in California, to get people into a patient setting. Many people say it's like a housing issue, and I just don't see it as a housing issue. I think if we wanted to solve a housing issue, we can solve that tomorrow. But right now, we have such a disconnect between how we solve things at the local level and how things are done at a policy level.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's a cost of living thing. Yeah, it's terrible, the cost of living thing, but it's clearly a drug and mental health thing, and a dangerous thing. I mean, it's like the laws in Oakland are not being enforced, and I think it's not the police department's fault. In my opinion, I feel like they're short-staffed. They've been asked to pretty much let the little stuff go and the medium stuff go.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The traffic laws are not enforced clearly. I mean, you don't get a sense that there's any law and order in Oakland right now. And the neighborhoods, I went to the west side of Oakland and drove all around. And I mean, there's just blocks and blocks and blocks that are just graffitied and abandoned and boarded up. And I don't know if there's a plan that they're going to gentrify that at one point. So they've just pretty much let it go for right now. They're going to come back to it later. I do you know what's going on West Oakland over there where I saw this long blocks and miles of just neglect?
For one thing, honestly, our politicians on the right and the left, they just use it as a wedge issue. They just use it as sort of a talking point. Oh, we're going to solve this. We're going to solve that. And then the right just uses that as a battering hammer when these are real people. And you know how many people have been affected by this. And our politicians just don't want to solve any of it. I think there's zero accountability for them to actually do it until the people themselves actually say this is enough. And you've actually seen in San Francisco, there's an article that came out recently, and San Francisco in general, where they're certain districts in Russian Hill and the Marina are hiring private guards. They're hiring private armed guards to actually secure their property. I mean, at what point does this start to really kind of escalate for all parties involved?
I feel like in Oakland, like you guys have been there, so you don't like feel the energy, because you're used to it. But then I come in and I'm like, oh my God, like it's just, you could just feel it's very strong. The energy is very strong. It's not like evil or anything. It just it doesn't feel
settled,
safe, nor does it feel peaceful, charming, welcoming.
No, it's not peaceful.
It's very edgy.
Yeah.
No, it's very edgy and in your face and kind of, you just can't let your guard down. And then
I always feel it's very hostile down there. It's extremely hostile. You have to be on edge. Like, it's not a place you can just let your guard down, because like everything is just trying to fuck you over and steal from you, beat you up, inject you with drugs, hook you on drugs. Like it's just that sort of like I said, it's like a fucking vortex. Like,
hey, Eric, do you think I could survive in Oakland's hoods?
I don't know, Mappy. You're not very tough, and I think they might actually steal those awesome shoes you have.
Oh, man, Eric, that's messed up. Hey, Mappy, I think you'd be fine out there. I think you could survive. You're tough. Don't listen to him.
It's just, here's the craziest thing. California property is so freaking expensive, and it's just like, Oakland really is geographically, it's prime. It's like prime real estate in the planet. This is what blows my mind. It's like you literally don't have the weather, you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the ports, you don't have all this stuff. I mean, literally, it just blows my mind. It's like, it's not the desert of Nevada where there's nothing, and you have this place here that's just gold in history and everything, and it's just completely fucked up. Like, what? Like, people are clamoring head over heels to get in America, to live in California, to be around this stuff. And it's just like refuse and trash and decrepit bullshit everywhere. And that's what just blows my mind. I mean, you've been around the planet, so have I. There's not many places like the Bay Area that are like this, that have the weather, the infrastructure, the people, the community, all this stuff going on. And it's just like blown out graffiti everywhere. Like, it's just, yeah, I don't understand. I hope things change. And again, everybody likes to point fingers. I think it's going to take all of, basically the community to say enough. And there's pockets of that. I mean, there really are voices, like people I mentioned earlier, that are trying to make sense of this all. but the machine is just too strong at this point. I mean, I hate to be apathetic and just say, hey, just kind of throw your hands up, but the machine really is just far too strong. I mean, people always say things have got to get worse before they get any better, but like how much worse? I mean, you saw it. You saw the depravity. I mean, you saw just this sheer lack of, human compassion going on there. None of these leaders, I mean, none of the Oakland leaders, none of them want to solve this. They have zero interest in solving this. It is such a great wedge issue, such a great talking point. We're going to solve this. We're going to solve that. But honestly, like, I'm at this point where government doesn't solve anything. And I think it's going to take the people, just like the armed guards hiring private security. Like, when are the people just going to band together and just say, we're going to solve this? This is the accountability. This is what's going to happen to actually get this done. Because it just can't go on anymore. I mean, actually, I guess it can, because we're going to see how far we're going to push this.
Are a lot of people leaving Oakland? I mean, I would not want to live in. Now, you could go up in Walnut Creek. You can go up in the hills, and you can be, there are areas in Oakland that are nice.
Yeah. You could go up, Piedmont and Montclair and up in there, and still kind of hang out Berkeley Hills, and you'll be fine. There's some nice areas too of Oakland that are still fine, but I don't know if people are like leaving at the rate to really kind of make a difference in it, because again, it's just sort of this vortex that it's accessible to jobs and stuff and things that people will just like put up with the misery and do it. But it spills over, like the crime and everything, it spills over into all the communities. Like, nobody's immune to it. Like, I've seen it happen. Walnut Creek's got increasing shootings and different things. And I mean, it just spills over to wherever. It really is. It's kind of like this cancer that starts to metastasize, for lack of better words.
I mean, there is a lot of pride in Oakland, I have to say, and compared to the other side of the Bay, I don't think there's a lot of pride over there, self-pride. But like, you got West Oakland. I mean, there's a strong sense of community based on the people that I talk to, and they're like, we look out for each other. We want Oakland to get better. When people are suffering or when there's vandalism, we try to stand up for the mom and pops. Forget the AT&T store or the Sprint store. Like, you can break that place up, but like, that's grandma's country kitchen cafe, or that's the Chinese lady's restaurant. Like, don't mess with that. Like, so I got the sense of that. And but there's a lot of pride, but at the same time, there's so much neglect in just the way things look there. That it's kind of like a dichotomy, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's like any system. There's the people, then there's, again, I'm going to blame the government, because it's essentially, Oakland's a fantastically geographically blessed area. I mean, when the rest of the Bay will be foggy, Oakland will usually be a little bit warmer, a little bit sunnier. It's accessible. It's just absolutely blessed by where it is, like, from a strategic standpoint. So it's actually really prime conditions. That's why people have a lot of love for it. There's a lot going on, a lot of history there. And yeah, there's the people are amazing. They're beautiful. I mean, you can go down there and talk to some awesome, really creative people. So there is that whole thing going on. And I don't want to bash like Oakland as a place. Oakland as a place is awesome. But Oakland as a government and a system is completely broken. And yeah, I mean, I've got Oakland pride. Again, I'm proud that I was born there. I lived there for a while. I still got friends there. I still would like to visit. But again, it's kind of in the situation where I'm kind of weighing my odds. Like, oh, do I want to go off on a hike and be safe in the woods? Or do I want to go visit my friend in Oakland and get potentially mugged? But yeah, I think it's easy in any system to kind of separate, to kind of look at it. That's how I look at it. It's like Oakland, the system, the government is completely broken, no accountability. Nobody wants to fix it. And there's the people which want to fix things. And, what's going to happen at the end of the day? What's the breaking point? There's probably going to be some catalyst at some point. I'm an optimist, in a way. I'm a glass half full kind of person. So I feel like there's going to be a situation or a point where it just can't go on anymore. I don't know if we're close to that, though. I really don't, because people are just tolerating it still. There's $1 million homes and tons of money flying around. People start trying to still move there. I mean, it is what it is right now.
I mean, I don't think elected leaders are going to do anything. It's going to be the community is going to have to step up and do the work themselves. Hey guys, so if anything I just talked about upset you or made you sad or mad, well then do something about it. Call your local leaders and demand change. Chip in and help those in need. Make your community better, because communities don't get better without hard work and determination. America's a great place. It just needs some more love and pride.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.
And are you looking to move and need advice? I do consulting. That's right. I'll sit down and talk about where the next perfect place for you and your family should be. I do it all the time. Together, let's find you a new home that's safe and checks all your boxes. You can get my email in the description to find out how I can help you find your perfect relocation.